All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott from Jeff Teaches Programming. And in one of the last videos, I went and redid, for lack of better words, the second version of the BMI application, the second GUI or graphical user interface version. All right, and now I've got version 3. And what I've done in this version, as it says, it's a revamped version where I added a return, actually in here, I made the return button work. In other words, it's going to allow you to get from the main form back to the startup form. Again, we've used modularization. And again, we've got the menu options. But I do want to read this. Okay, I did add some generic error functions. All right, but mainly this note. This ended up becoming, for lack of better words, kind of an obfuscated version of the program. And what that means is it probably could have been written better. As it says, it was probably written in a less understandable manner than necessary. So I added a boatload of comments all over the place. So let's first run it, make sure it works, and then take a look at it. All right, so if I run it, now I've got the picture, and I've got a little stuff here I changed this around a little. There's the formula, why BMI is used, and the classifications. Okay, I made it a little smaller so it would all fit in here. I can go to the main form, and I can go back to this form, and I can exit out of here if I do want to. But I'm going to go here, and again, it has both menu options and buttons on both of them. Okay, so if I don't put anything in, you'll notice that I get height error occurred, a height input error occurred, field cleared, please try again. So if I put in non-numeric, same thing. If I put in out of range, either too low or too high, I get all that. So let's say I put in something valid, 72. Now it runs through the same gamut with a weight, but it says weight error occurred. So again, just want you to see that all of these do work. So again, they all do work. And again, if I put in like something like that, it says optimal weight. So that all works. All right, so I'd like to take a few minutes to go through everything that's been done in here and then explain what I'm going to do in the next version of this to hopefully make it a little better and easier to understand. All right, again, as I mentioned, I mean, when you look here, the first 50 plus lines are comments, and that's good. All right, I don't think I even need this. I don't know, this was from an older version that I had that hopefully, let's see if I put this in there and save it, it shouldn't give me any errors. Oh, it is. All right, well, I'm going to just bring that back again. I'm not sure why it's doing that. Well, let's just put that using statement back in there. I had so many problems, and as I mentioned in an earlier lecture, fortunately, unfortunately, whatever you want to say, but what I did was, for lack of better words, I screwed up and I didn't make a copy of what I was working with. Okay? All right. So again, here's my constants. I'm not going to go over those. When you click the calculate button, it calls input and calculate output. I put this, we come in and we just set two strings, height str for what's in the height text box, weight str for what's in the weight text box. Then I put in a try catch block. All right, so it's going to go through everything, and if it gives an error, really shouldn't hit this at all. But if it does, it says the following error occurred, and it'll explain the error. It'll say error. It'll have an OK button and just an error icon. So what are we trying to do in here? Well, again, I put in a lot of comments. We're going to attempt to validate the values in both that height str, which is the value in the height text box, and weight str, which is the value in the weight text box. Each value must be numeric, and height has to be an integer between 12 and 96. Weight has to be an integer between 1 and 777. Remember, that is min height, that is max height, that is min weight, and that is max weight. All right? So we've got here, we're going to call the function is the data valid, and it's going to run checks to make sure that height str is an integer and it's within range. Then do the same thing for weight str. So if it works, now we can just say height is, we don't have to check it anymore because it worked. We are already validating that that worked inside of here. So we do that. So I shouldn't even say attempt. We can just say parse. All right, it's not a try parse, it's a parse. Try parse means you're attempting to do it, and that's what we're going to do inside of the is the data valid. So parse the height into an integer, parse the weight into an integer, call calculate BMI and pass in the height and weight, and then once you've got the BMI, call calculate BMI status, passing in the BMI and putting the results in BMI status. Finally, take those last two things that we just had, the BMI and the BMI status, and just output them to the appropriate text boxes. Okay? So let's look at is the data valid. I should mention one thing to you also. All right, just because I've been kind of negligent in not mentioning this to you before. Got a lot of stuff open here, so let's get rid of all this that we don't need. Okay, for example, this box that's right here, this text box, all right? In fact, let's really look at the other one on the other screen. These two text boxes, I should not allow the user to be able to go in and write to those, him or herself. So if I do highlight both of these text boxes, there is a read-only property over here someplace. Well, I know there's a read-only property for here. Maybe there isn't a read-only property for a label. I thought that there was. So we could have made it a text box in here and here and made them read-only. All right? That might have been a little cleaner way to do it, is what I'm saying. All right, let's go back in here. Let's look at our code. All right. So this is the data valid? So we're passing in height str, which again is the value that was in the text box for height, or the height text box, weight str, which is the value that was in the weight text box. I added 4 flags in here. I could have done this as 1 flag, but I put them in as 4 flags just so you could see what each one was attempting to do. Is the height an int? Is the height within range? Is the weight an int? And is the weight within range? So for all these, if the height is an int, it's true. If it's not an int, it's false. If the height is within range, it's true. If it's not within range, it's false. And the same things, the same things for weight. All right. So we call isInt32. This is one of the generic functions that I've written that I'm going to attempt again to put these inside of. I'm going to attempt to put these inside of a library file. I do have a library file that I created earlier, but somehow again that got damaged. So this isInt32, that's our Boolean flag. So this is going to have to return a bool, and it's going to have height str passed into it. So what is that? Well, we've got another flag here that's called isSuccess. True if it is an int passed in, and false if it's not. So we do a try parse here because it could fail. We don't care what the value is. We just care whether or not we can do it. So the out is an underscore, which means it's called a discard value because we're not using it. If this didn't work, So if we attempted to parse it and it failed, is success is false. Otherwise, we set it to true up here, and if this isn't true, we just return is success, which was set to true. All right, and you'll notice that the range one is similar. It's not the same thing, but it's similar. So we've got this is within range. That's the value we're passing in. This is the minimum value we're expecting and the maximum value we're expecting. All right, so we've got another is success, true if the thing is within range and false if it's not. Here we do want to go and keep that number so we can check to see if it's within range or not. So that number is this number here. So again, we attempt to parse this into an integer. If it fails, the parse did not work, so we return false. Otherwise, the parse did work. All right, so we've already come in here and we've checked this. It already should work. Notice I'm returning false, but here is where we're making the check. So for height, we're saying is the number greater than or equal to 12 and less than or equal to 96. For weight, we're saying is the number greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 777. If it fails, we again set is success to false. All right, and we return is success, just like we did before. All right, so again, that's what we're doing in here. We're saying is the height an integer? If it's not, notice we're calling this thing I wrote called height or weight error, and we're passing in the height, and we're again returning false. This height or weight error just basically says, give me a message box. And I'm going to either pass in height if the type was height, or weight if the type was weight. And I'm going to say either a height input error occurred, or I'm going to say a weight input error occurred. All right, and then it'll say field cleared, please try again. The title will be error occurred. All right, it'll either say height error occurred or weight error occurred. It's going to have an OK button, and it's going to have an error. Well, the problem is I'm passing in height or weight, but I want to clear either the height stuff or the weight stuff. So I did a switch in here. We didn't have to do it this way, but it's how I did it. It also gave me a chance to kind of go over the switch again with you. We're switching on type, which is a string. So if we passed in the word height right there, if we passed in height, then we're going to clear the height text box and set the focus there and return. We're done. If it says weight, we're going to clear the weight text box, set the focus, return, because we're done. This default should never be hit, but it's a good idea to put it there anyway. So I just said return. All right. So we do a similar thing then for weight that I just showed you for height. And when I say that this was somewhat obfuscated, probably could have been written in a better way. In fact, I'm going to try to do that with the next one, with the next version. Now, in the next version, I'm going to add a couple more functions in here. We don't have to add these, but I'm going to, in case there are things we might use later. We've got here isInt 32. We've got is within range. In fact, I'm probably going to add 3 more functions. So I've got an is within range and isInt 32. And I'm going to add an is decimal so we could check for a decimal value, and is double so we could check for a double value, and maybe you'll have something, for example, called like is input empty so we can check to see if the input is empty or not. All right, the calculate BMI, notice I did put this. You don't have to, when we called calculate BMI up on the top here, wherever we call that, here we go. We passed in height and weight. Those are the actual parameter names. All right, height and weight. All right, those are the actual names. But we don't have to give them the actual names when we're writing a function. I just put that in there to show you that. So notice in here I called them H and W. We could have still called them height and weight. We could have called them goodbye and hello. anything we wanted to call them. This is the imperial formula, which means that we're using inches and pounds. There's also a metric formula that uses, I don't remember, it's kilograms and meters or something like that. And also this right here could have been written like this. There is a math property, and this basically says h squared, which is h times h. The BMI status has not changed. So I'm not going to go over that. The output statistics has not changed. So I'm not going to go over that. And, when you click the clear button, it calls clear all fields, which does just that. The return now hides the current form, creates an instance of the startup form, and then shows the startup form. In much the same way, in the startup, we hide the startup form, we make an instance of the main form, and we say to show the main form. Again, very similar to the stuff that we have been working on in the past. Exit, no change there. Okay, we're calling it both from the menu and from the button. We're calling show startup form both from the menu and the button. We're calling the clear both from the menu and the button. We're calling the calculate both from the menu and the button. And finally, when the form loads, we want to this sets the focus. So in other words, just make sure that as soon as that form loads, what should be highlighted at any time then is the height text box. So if I click there, there it is. If I remove that line, I'll have to manually go there. Always try to make the program as simple for people working on it as possible. Okay? I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this. It's probably a shorter lecture, 17 minutes. But like I said, I believe at least I've said what I wanted to say in here. All right? So I'll be back, and I'm going to make another version of this. And in this next version, all right, I've somehow screwed up the latest version of the console app. But what I'm going to try to do is to write the generic library function. All right, and after I write the generic library, I shouldn't say function, the generic library class, I want to be able to use it, and we'll see if we can get it to work first with our GUI app, and then we'll see if we can get it to work with our console app. After we do that, I do want to jump back into the payroll program. Now, the reason that I used the BMI one for this is payroll has got 4 different possibilities. All right, we'll see if we can do something similar in payroll as well. Okay, so again, I'll be back with that in just a couple of minutes. I'll see you then.